What's up, my friend? Before we get this episode of Optimize Your Body podcast underway, just wanted to give you one last chance to work with me for free for the next 3 months to celebrate Optimize Your Body program's 5th birthday. I'm giving one lucky winner full scholarship under my wing, which means you're going to get coached by me for 3 months for absolutely free. Now, this is the last call out. I'm going to be selecting the winners on Monday or Tuesday of next week. It's been an overwhelming response. A lot of people have applied, but you still got a chance. So don't miss it. If you feel like you've wanted to work with us for a while and you really want to get your dream transformation with your mind and body over the next 3 months, this is your last chance, right? So just click the link in the show notes and I'll be selecting the winner based on what it means to them and what their real reason is to achieve it, essentially. So anyway, enjoy the episode.
What's up? Hope you're all good in the hood, my friends. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Optimize Your Body podcast. And today I wanted to jump straight into the topic of flexible dieting versus clean eating. And this is a very interesting one, right? And you're going to get a ton of value from it as usual. First and foremost, I have actually done both of these, right? So let's just really break it down first and foremost. Now, flexible dieting, what is that? Ultimately, it's giving you more flexibility with your approach. Now, you may or may not have heard of IIFYM, if it fix your macros. Now, all in all, I'm not a big fan, okay, of that message of, if it fits your macros, then anything's fine. You can eat anything as long as it fits within your protein, fats, carbs, and calories, right? Because as I've talked about before, everyone knows my philosophy when it comes to this stuff. And, processed foods are designed to make us overeat. So you're going to be never satiated and always fighting a losing battle, really. Now, it can work though, right? Now, having a flexible approach is great, but the thing is, like anything within the fitness and nutrition world, everything always gets labeled and taken to the extreme, right? So flexible dieting, great if you use it properly and appropriately, but, fitting anything into your macros and calories and any types of foods is not really going to work, right? It's not going to be ideal. Clean eating is obviously eating, for example, following like a meal plan, right? So following a meal plan and eating quote unquote, just clean food. So real food, but following more of a rigid approach effectively, right? Now, as I say, I've taken everything to the extreme, my friend, as you know, right? So especially with bodybuilding and whatnot, as a lot of you know my journey anyway, right? So I'm not going to get too much into that. But with clean eating, for example, I used to follow a strict diet plan. I started off following diet plans when I was competing, but then I would do that even when I wasn't competing because that's all I knew. So I was like, right, okay, I got shredded for the stage. So how do I stay in shape? Because then I became obsessed with how I looked even more so, right? So then it was like, right, okay, I'm going to follow this diet plan Monday to Friday, and then I'm going to enjoy myself on the weekends, right? I'm going to let my hair down. And then what would happen, obviously, because I was too rigid with the approach and too restrictive, then no shit, I would overeat and eat like an arsehole, basically, on the weekends. That's what I like to say. And we all know what that is, right? Eating like an arsehole. You don't have to get me to explain that. Every single person listening knows exactly what that is, right? So, and then my experience with flexible diet, and then I took that to the extreme as well, right? So I was like, right, let me see what I can fit in. Because what I was doing then when I started tracking food is I was then, again, with these extreme behaviors, a lot of it was kind of triggered through bodybuilding and other stuff going on. And then, what I was doing then is, right, let's see how much shit I can eat and stay within my macros. I only did that for a short period. But a lot of people still live, as you all know, I've overcome these problems and it's made me, on top of my game now. So I'm thankful for these struggles. But a lot of people don't come out of that, right? And they get obsessed. They get, very much almost stuck, really, or fixed on one extreme or the other, right? So I'm going to break down a very interesting study for you, and then I'm going to give you some takeaways that, you can go away and think about or maybe implement after this, right? Now, I think it's really appropriate this time of year as well to be talking about this stuff because, a lot of you listening might be looking to tighten things up now, right? New year, new me, although I hate that. Nothing wrong with reinventing yourself and transforming yourself this year. But, new year, new me, I feel like gets taken to the extreme as well, right? Because people go from one extreme to another. But if you're looking to level up, this is perfect timing because, right, how can I level up and, improve my relationship with food, my habits, my eating habits, and really get into fantastic shape physically and mentally without feeling too restricted and without feeling like, I'm constantly in that diet mindset. It's a horrible place to be, right? I'm sure you can relate to this when you're stuck in that kind of like diet, or like, when you go out with friends or whatever, you're like, oh, I can't because I'm diet, using that word, just be mindful with that, right? It's all good saying, no, I choose not to have that food because, I'm being tighter now with my choices because I really want to kind of improve, my mind and body. Nothing wrong with that. But when you say things like, again, going back to restriction, when you say things like, I can't have that because I'm following X diet, when you use those words, automatically, again, like I said on the last podcast, you're hypnotizing yourself and then you're going to feel restricted, right? And I used to do the same thing. I used to say, I can't have this, can't have that because it's not within my plan, right? When I was bodybuilding. So the study, let's get stuck in, my friend, right? So they did a 10-week study on both of these approaches. I'm going to elaborate a bit more on the approaches as well. So don't worry if you're thinking, what the hell is he talking about? But 10-week study, and basically the people within the study were doing resistance training. So they were lifting weights, and quite a lot. I think they were averaging like 4 workouts a week, actually, strength training. And bear in mind that makes a massive difference because of the effect on the metabolism and everything and body composition. So what they did is they put the 2 groups. So just to be clear, one of the groups was, basically eating based on what their macros and calories were. So, right, here's your protein, fats, and carbs. Here's your calories. Go for it. No restrictions whatsoever. Eat what you want as long as you stick within those guidelines. And the other group were following a rigid diet plan where it was predominantly whole foods. All right. And what they did is they put both groups into a 20% calorie deficit, right, for 10 weeks. And surprise, surprise, there was no difference in fat loss, right? Because, my friend, no matter what approach we talk about, what angle I come from with the stuff I'm talking about, you cannot debate or, challenge the law of thermodynamics, right? Burning more than you're eating. So obviously they put both groups in a 20% calorie deficit. In other words, they found out what their maintenance calories were, and then they took the calories down by 20%, and there was absolutely no difference over the 10 weeks in fat loss, okay? What they did find, which was quite interesting, was the clean eating group, or the rigid meal plan group. They actually gained 2 kgs less lean body mass after the study, right? So that's what they found after the study. They gained 2 kg less lean body mass, right? So, this is during my bad. Sorry. This is during this is after the study. Yeah. So after the study, what they found was the rigid meal plan, they gained 2 kilos less lean body mass. In other words, that's quite a big difference, right? Or fat-free mass. In other words, muscle. So the flexible dieting group actually built 2 kgs more muscle after the study than the rigid meal plan group on average, right? Which is pretty significant. And that would look very different on your body as well, 2 kgs of muscle, or you'd notice it for sure anyway. And also it goes to show, right? But the reason they speculated was, the people tracking, because the flexible dieting group would have been very meticulous with tracking, right? Because they'd be tracking their calories and macros and protein. And also we know that, even MyFitnessPal app, which is the most accurate one, is not entirely accurate. I think it's on average about 90% accurate. Lower than that, really, if you add it all up in terms of food labels and how far they can be out and stuff like that. So it's notoriously inaccurate. But the likelihood is that the flexible group were, more consistent, right? Because they're used to tracking and they're very meticulous with that, right? Which is probably why, they probably hit more protein afterwards and therefore built more muscle and had better results afterwards than the rigid group, right? Because you can imagine the rigid group were probably not used to tracking and weighing, and then they probably just were too loose with things after the study, right? But ultimately, it always comes down to the same thing, with this study and the conclusion, my friend. When protein and calories are equally equated, right? In other words, when you hit your protein target, right? So you have, high protein or adequate protein for what your goal is, depending on what your goal is, and you have the right amount of calories for your goal. So in other words, if you're looking to lose weight, you're in at least a 10 to 25% calorie deficit. In other words, you're reducing your calories by 10 to 20% below your maintenance, basically, right? Then you lose similar amounts of fat, regardless of any other variable, right? Fats and carbs, a personal preference. They make no difference. And yes, they make a difference to energy and gut health, those kind of things, and all those things which are more, I would say, nuanced and things to tune in a little, people tune into those things a bit later in their journey once they've mastered, managing their body weight and everything else and body composition and everything else. But when protein and calories are equated and calculated, right, and done properly, and you stick to them, you lose similar amounts of fat regardless of the variables, right? So again, it comes down to the same principles, right? It really is quite simple when you strip it all back. If you can hit the calories that you need to hit, you can consistently hit the protein target, which is very challenging, by the way, for the average person. It sounds easy, very challenging. The fat loss results are always basically pretty much exactly the same. All right. So so that was an interesting study I wanted to talk about today. Now, let's go a little bit deeper into these two approaches, because it's very, very important to understand this, right? Now, the key thing is, and I haven't really talked about it from this angle before, my friend, but you got to have a flexible mindset. There's something I was thinking, how did I overcome, the bloody emotional eating that I was doing all the time? You know what I mean? For those 2 years, on and off bodybuilding comps, even when I wasn't competing, right? I was struggling with that. How did I overcome a poor relationship with food and everything else? And I was like, what it was is eventually first and foremost, like I said before, was just eating more whole foods. Very simple. That was the main thing. Less processed foods, more whole foods. Keeps you more satiated. You naturally eat less, and you naturally get more in tune with your body's signals, and therefore you look better as a byproduct. But the key thing is, and this is always the same with my clients, my friend, right? It's keeping a flexible mindset, because even with quote unquote flexible dieting, right? In other words, flexible dieting, just if you don't know what it is just like what I said, it's just sticking to your calories and macros that are prescribed to you, really, and then keeping your approach flexible. As long as you hit your protein primarily, stick to the calories. And if you have got fats and carbs prescribed, the other macros, then sticking to them roughly, although they don't make any difference to body composition, like I said. So, sticking to your protein and calories, for example, that's flexible dieting, and then just basically eat what you want. It sounds great on paper, by the way, my friend, but it's really not that simple. You can still fall into an inflexible mindset with that, because then people get really obsessed. People can do, like I did anyway at one point, and I've met lots of people, especially within the people I used to compete with and stuff like that, where they were obsessed with tracking calories and macros and becoming really rigid with that, right? And then they were like, oh, I didn't stick to my macros and calories for one day, and then they get pissed off and binge eat, right? Or couldn't stick to my calories today, which, by the way, it goes over a weekly basis, right? Not a daily thing. With clients, I always plan out their calories over the week, right? Which is the way to do it, because the body doesn't work on a day-by-day thing. It's a case of having roughly the calories you're going to eat, and it's actually a good thing. Without going off too much on a tangent, it's actually a good thing to have different amounts of calories every day, because it promotes kind of flexibility with the metabolism, and also can help with performance in the gym if you're having higher calorie days, and banking up some calories for the weekend so you can have more flexibility and stuff like that. But what I was getting at is the flexible mind. So you can be quote unquote being very flexible with your approach in terms of what food you're eating, but then get really, really rigid and obsessed with sticking to the calories and macros, and then overeating because you're getting too rigid with the numbers, right? And then the same goes for people on a meal plan or quote unquote clean eating. You can go out for a spontaneous meal, for example, and then because you have come off your meal plan, for example, or whatever, you skip the meal and then you ended up making a poor choice, you can then go hit the off button, and then it's all or nothing again, right? So it can go both ways. It all comes down to mindset. It comes down to repetition in terms of how hard are you working on basically being consistent with eating real foods. In other words, single ingredient foods. My friend, if you can take that one thing into this year, eat more single ingredient foods, right? Instead of foods with more than one ingredient in, it'll be life-changing if you can really focus on that. When you do your food shop, right, I'm only going to shop for primarily single ingredient foods: steak, avocado, berries, banana. Okay. You don't need a rocket scientist to break it all down for you, right? Game changer, right? But it all circles back to adherence as well, my friend, right? So we can talk about flexible dieting, clean eating, keto, go down the list of all these diets that, people use, but it comes down to adherence and personal preference. Okay. So what fits into your lifestyle more? What's going to make it easier? Okay. So which approach is the easiest? This comes up time and time again in studies. Which approach, which way of eating is going to feel the easiest, right? That's the one that you're much more likely to adhere to, and therefore get sustainable results. That's the big thing, my friend, right? As I always talk about, right? Remember, 6 out of 7 people who are overweight are able to successfully lose weight during their lifetime, right? 6 out of 7 people. Several times, by the way, not just once. But up to 95% of those 6 out of 7 people will fail at keeping it off in the long term. That's a huge number, my friend, right? And then 1 to 2/3 of those people who, who manage to keep that in the small minority of the 5% of people, 1 to 2/3 of those people will add back on more weight than they. Sorry, let me take that back. Sorry, out of the 95% of people who actually gain all the way back, basically, 1 to 2/3 of those people will add back on more weight than what they lost in the first place. I think the average person gains something like 5 to 6 pounds a year or something now, maybe more than that. And to be honest, my friend, it's actually climbing as well. And there's loads of factors there, which I'm not going to go into. The obesity epidemic and weight gain is actually becoming a bigger problem. So, and we're not just talking about weight gain. By the way, right, if you're listening to this, you're thinking, God, he's going on about weight. No, it's about mindset. It's about approach. It's about behaviors. And ultimately, it's about you being able to be sustainable with whatever your goal is. It doesn't matter, right? Because it's going to apply to everything. Like if you're looking to build muscle, if you're looking to level up your body and just get to the next level, basically eating whole foods predominantly, right? And avoiding those ultra-processed foods, and ultimately finding an approach in terms of whether that's having a meal plan, because that works for some of my clients, my friend, I'll be honest. Sticking to a meal plan, again, it has to be flexible. It can't be like, eating the same meals every day. When I prescribe my clients a meal plan, it's first of all, it's adapted to how they already eat. So I look at how they're eating currently, and then I adapt something which is very similar, but which is just varied to A, make sure that they enjoy their meals, and B, make sure that they hit their macros and calories, right? That could be a good approach for a lot of people, right? And it does work for a lot of people. I would say all in all, though, the best approach that I've had with clients is definitely not giving them, I can give them examples of meal plans and everything else to stick to the numbers, but it definitely would be quote unquote flexible dieting, right? In other words, what I mean by that is I don't mean, yes, okay, free for all, go for your life, my friend, to my client, yeah, and eat what you want, as long as no, I don't mean that. What I mean is, right, meet them where they're at. This is how they're currently eating, all right? This is how much protein they're having. This is the types of foods they're eating. How can we, basically get them to hit their protein goal, stay within their calories, and change minimal stuff, right? One thing at a time, right? Let's add this in, let's change that, etc., etc., and keep it flexible so then they can still have, a bit more balance. And then when they're socializing and stuff like that, then they know over the space of a week, if they stick to the calories that I prescribed them for the week, not the day, right? So let's say I tell a person that we're going to aim for roughly 2,000 calories. First and foremost, there's always going to be a range of calories. So we're going to say, 1,900 to 2,000. Then I'm going to say, right, what we're going to aim for is give or take 13,000 to 14,000 for the week. And we can break that up however we like, right? So don't get too rigid day by day. So really, really simple stuff there, my friend. But, the biggest takeaways, as I say, is always going to be A, you got to keep a flexible mindset. Okay. You got to be willing to be versatile. B, the best approach is going to be the one that feels the easiest. Adherence is absolutely everything, my friend. Okay. So yeah, and I'm going to leave it there. I just wanted to say one or two more things. What you got to look at is, we can label things, and that's another thing as well. Like what I notice a lot, and this is something that I used to struggle with, is, cheat meals. Okay. So labeling things, for example, I notice this a lot with people who, if it fits your macros or, follow a really flexible approach in terms of eating what they want and sticking to their macros and calories. Basically, they have cheat meals, right? And I used to do this as well. My friend, everything I talk about, I've been through and I've coached hundreds of clients through. Okay. That's why you need to listen to this wisdom, right? Because it's on point. But what I was going to say is, flexible dieting, I've lost my trail of thought right now. Bear with me. Flexible dieting, cheat meals, right? So, when you're labeling something a cheat meal, another strong takeaway for you, right? If you're, as long as I hit my protein and calories, I'm all good. And then you're like, right, I'm going to have a cheat meal. Nothing wrong. By the way, my friend, I promote flexibility. Okay. Like that's why I said it works better than a restrictive way normally for most people, depending on the person. That's not to say it should be restrictive clean eating or following a diet plan, but it can be for more people, for the average person. So when you have more of a flexible approach and as long as you're eating at least, 85% whole foods and you're hitting your protein and calories, you might want to have a cheat meal, right? Don't label it a cheat meal. Okay. So, being flexible doesn't mean you have to keep labeling things, right? Because when you do that and then you cheat, you quote unquote cheat on your diet or whatever you want to call it, then, you naturally feel guilty the next day because you've labeled it a cheat for a start, right? You're much more likely to go overboard as well, okay? And ultimately, it can really create more of a poor relationship with food. There's nothing. What I wanted to say is, though, if you want to have a burger and chips, you want to have a pizza, you're going out with friends, whatever it is, just don't label it, my friend. Trust me on this. Just say, right, I'm going to have a burger and chips because I want a burger and chips. All right. You're an adult. Don't label things cheat meal or cheat days, right? Because ultimately, what you're doing then is you're kind of like you're hitting the off button, right? And you got more chance of hitting the off button. You got more chance of going overboard as well. Because when I used to do that, I would look forward to it all. Yay! I'd be like, yes, my cheat meal's on Saturday, and then I'd be planning it out all week, and then I'd be so excited, and the anticipation would be so high, and I would have probably restricted a bit more than I needed to enjoy that cheat meal more. Then I would go overboard, right? Because then when you eat those foods and you've labeled it a cheat, it's like I'm cheating on my diet, and then you go, well, I might as well have a dessert, and then the next day you don't feel too good, and then it can be like, you know what? I might as well just have another cheat meal. You know what I'm saying? It can easily get out of hand, and it's just not necessary you're not cheating. You're just having a bloody burger and chips, right? Or whatever you're going to have. So that's a little thing I wanted to finish that with because that kind of intertwines with the flexible diet and approach. But ultimately, I hope that was helpful for you. It always comes down to the same thing. If you go, it's very simple on paper, but it's always going to come down to the behaviors, your lifestyle, and those kind of things. And the big factors that I always talk about and focus on your sleep, managing your stress, right? All these factors, they're hard to track in studies because it's very complex when it comes to stress management and sleep alone. And secondly, without those two things taken care of, without if you're overloading stress and you're not sleeping properly, everything's going to be out of whack. Your hormones, everything, your mental health, everything's going to be out of whack, and then you're going to make worse decisions with food. So they're the two big rocks. And then when it comes to nutrition, it's behaviors, it's working on the behaviors, it's working on eating more single ingredient foods and reducing ultra processed foods, getting those ultra processed foods out of the house. So you're much less likely to overeat, right? And just looking at what's going to be best for you, my friend, right? And just imagine, right? Just imagine this, just to finish off. Imagine where you could be, my friend, right? Even 90 days from now, right? 90 days. Imagine going into, wherever we're going to be in April, right? I know most of you in the US right now. So imagine, going into springtime, yeah? The birds are tweeting outside. It's getting light in the mornings, right? And you're feeling on top of your game. You may have dropped, your clothes might be small. You may have dropped the dress size or whatever that is, whatever your goal is. You may have packed on a load of muscle. Either way, you're feeling proud of what you've achieved at the first quarter of the year. And you're looking in the mirror like, yeah, spring's here. I'm feeling on top form. I'm brimming with confidence. My energy levels are charged up. I did what I said I was going to do. That's the most important thing, my friend. You've got to be someone. You've got to change your identity, right? If you really want it, you've got to upgrade your identity like I talked about previously. And you've got to really go, right, who do I need to become? I need to become a person who says, who backs up and does what they says they're going to do, right? I've talked about the ice bath. I'm going to order an ice bath tonight now. And I've committed to that because I'm the person who, when I say something, I commit to it and I lead by example, right? So you need to become that person who does that, who sticks to what they say. And you're not going to be perfect, but if you could be at least 80 to 90% consistent now with your training and nutrition, for example, and lifestyle factors like getting good sleep, for the next 90 days, imagine where you could be. You'd be on top form, my friends. You can make some, and that's why, with my clients, but the reality is though, my friend, right? 90 days is the minimum is what you need, the minimum to make changes that you can stick to. Because it's one thing making a few changes. Great, fantastic. Losing weight. Again, look at the stats, my friends, right? Look at the stats. 6 out of 7 people, will gain all the way back. And even when it comes to just getting in better shape, my friend, right? Even when it comes to just building muscle and just leveling up, most people don't stick to it. They're not consistent, right? So you've got to look at, right, let me get after it. Let me make changes I can stick to. And in order to do that, it's going to take you at least, 90 days, 3 months to do that. Anyway,